The night the road went quiet, I heard the hit before I saw the damage, a dull thud that traveled through the porch boards and the coffee mug in my hand. Headlights washed over the cedar fence, then slipped away down County Line Road like a guilty thought. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the mailbox me eighth in 3 months was curled in on itself like a soda can. I stood there with the cicadas and the damp, and I told myself it was wind or kids or some unlucky deer that mistook a painted post for moonlight. But the tire marks were too neat and the path too familiar. Folks around here call this place Coyote Bend, a spread where old ranches butt up against a master plan development with a homeowners association that likes rules more than people, and I'm the man stubborn enough to live in between. My name's Evan Hale. I moved out here for quiet mornings, the taste of mesquite smoke in the air, a driveway that sounds like gravel under a slow truck, not for spotlights lingering at the fence line, not for SUVs that roll by so slow you can count the driver's freckles. When the first mailbox splintered, I shrugged and built another. I made it pretty, then tough, then tougher, like maybe if I proved I could endure it would shame whoever was doing this into stopping. The HOA's patrol guide and uniform, clipped radio chatter, the kind of confidence you only get from walking around with other people's authority, stopped one afternoon and said, "Rough week, neighbor?" "Must be teenagers." He said neighbor like a dare. I asked if he'd seen anything. He said, "Just kids being kids." I wanted to believe him. On the third mailbox, he looked at my work and whistled. "You ought to plant those deeper." On the fifth, he smiled right through me and said, "There's a standard for these things. Our standards wouldn't want to violate anything." His name was Royce Leland, and if you talked to folks inside the gates you'd learn he was the kind of man who loved lines, painted lines, property lines, lines he could draw in the dirt with the toe of his boot and dare you to step over. We didn't have a history, not officially, but there's a kind of Cold War that happens when new houses go up across from old ones. They plant their ornamental grasses and trim their hedges with lasers, and I leave my pasture grass shaggy, because that's how the quail like it. And somewhere between those two aesthetics, resentment grows like Johnson grass after the rain. One morning, I found a note tucked in the wreckage. "Your box is too close to the road, dangerous." It wasn't signed, but it smelled like committee. I measured twice, checked the county code, even called the postmaster who sounded like he'd been answering the same question since Nixon. "Center line of the road to the post setback is right there on the sheet, sir." I was within the inch. That night, the sixth box died. Truth is, people don't go to war over mailboxes. They go to war over control. Who decides what's proper? Who stands taller in the homeowners Facebook group? Who never had to get their tires dusty before? Not even once. The box was a symbol, and whether I liked it or not, the symbol was my name. By the time I was mixing concrete for number 8, my neighbor, a retired teacher named Miss Pauline, walked over with lemonade and gossip. "I saw that patrol car parked across from your pasture again," she said, eyes bright in that way older folks get when they smell a story. Engine idling like it was keeping the mosquitoes away. I told her thank you, that I'd handle it. She set the jar down and looked me in the eye. "Sometimes bullies don't use fists," she said. "They use clipboards." The night number 8 died, I stopped pretending. I followed the tire marks to the turnoff and saw, plain as a church bulletin, the scuffed plastic from a bumper, the print of a tread that matched what I'd seen rolling slow past my gate all month. I called the sheriff again, Deputy Haynes, steady voice, apologetic, and he said, "Mr. Hale, we need something more than your strong suspicion." I heard him want to help and felt the uselessness of wanting without proof. So I did what any mule-stubborn man does when he's tired of being pushed, half out of anger, half out of respect for myself. I sat down at the kitchen table with a legal pad and the county code, and I designed a mailbox that looked like a mailbox but acted like an anchor. The outside would be polite farmhouse white, little red flag, nothing anyone could call aggressive. Underground, it would be honest steel core, concrete footing, a depth you'd respect when you met it at speed. Every measurement sat right inside the rule book because I wanted the rules on my side, not as a shield to hide behind, but as a mirror. I poured concrete on a Tuesday, the light so clean it looked like the world had been washed overnight. I set the steel, plumbed it true, and brushed on paint while the sun cooled. When Miss Pauline shuffled over again and asked, "Building a fortress, Mr. Hale?" I laughed, told her it was just a mailbox that meant what it said. She grinned like I'd told a joke she wished she'd written. That afternoon, The patrol SUV rolled by Royce behind the wheel and our eyes met for a breath. He gave me that thin smile again, like a man who smells a trap he doesn't care to understand. I didn't sleep that night so much as wait. There's a kind of quiet that sits on land after midnight, a blanket woven from every cricket and owl and distant rig on the highway. And in that quiet, I heard the softest ramp up, an engine moving from idle to intent. Headlights slid along the fence posts, long stripes of light and shadow. I turned off the lamp on my desk and stood at the front window, not wanting to be a witness so much as a man who sees what he knows is coming. The SUV paused at the far end of the cul-de-sac, reversed, and lined up like a batter tapping the plate. My heart found that old drummer's cadence from high school, steady and hot. There's a space between decision and consequence that feels like falling and flying at the same time, and Royce rode that space with both hands on the wheel. He hit the gas. The road seemed to contract. I could hear the gravel spit, the engine's throat open, the sudden, sick grace of a 2-ton machine aimed at something small and stubborn. When the hit came, it didn't sound like wood shattering, it sounded like the truth being said out loud. Metal folded, airbags exploded into white. The hood crumpled like paper, and the mailbox, ordinary as a cup of coffee in the morning, did what it was built to do. It stood. Silence held for a second, then tore open. Doors opened on porches up and down the street. Rectangles of yellow light fell across driveways, and the night filled with that specific pitch of human surprise. Miss Pauline's screen door banged. A couple from inside the gates, out for a late walk, stopped and stared like they'd stumbled into theater. I walked down the drive slowly, not triumphant, not cruel, just careful, because I knew the part I'd played and I knew what came next. Royce fought with the seat belt, eyes wild, the bitterness of pride deflated all at once. I smelled the powder from the airbags and the sweet antifreeze that says things are broken you can't fix with a hammer. He looked at me and tried for that smile again, but it wouldn't come. You can't put a tank on a post and call it a mailbox, he spat, voice raw and defiant. I built it to code, I said, steady, the way you speak to a man who's used to being the loudest voice on the block. It's ordinary above ground. It's strong below. You met the below. You set a trap, he said. I set a boundary, I answered. You drove through it. Someone was already on the phone with the sheriff. Someone else was filming. Neighbors who never used my name before said it out loud now in the question form, Evan, like I might tell them what to think. I didn't move closer. I didn't touch the SUV. I stood so the porch camera's mine. Miss Pauline saw what they needed to see. When Deputy Haynes pulled up, lights swirling, he took in the scene with the tired patience of a man who's seen folks make trouble for themselves. Evening, Mr. Hale, he said. Evening, Mr. Leland. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, and the way he said the names carried the weight of all his notes on all my calls. He walked the skid marks, measured the distance, looked at the post, tapped it with his knuckles, then looked at me. You got the paperwork? I handed him the folder I'd been keeping on the kitchen counter all week, a neat little book of timings and measurements and printouts with yellow highlighter. He flipped through slowly. Seems like you did your homework. He turned to Royce. Tell me what happened. Royce's jaw worked. It was an accident. The post is. It's not normal. Haynes raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. Looks like the sort of normal that minds its business, if you ask me. He wrote down the plate, the mileage, the time. He asked me if I wanted to press charges for property damage on the previous incidents, and I said I wanted to stop. He nodded, like a man who knows stopping is sometimes the only justice that feels like mercy. By morning, the story had already become 2 stories. Inside the gates, the HOA message board lit up with words like reckless, booby trap, vigilante. Out here on the bend, Miss Pauline told the produce guy at the farmer's market, and he told the feed store clerk, and by sundown the story had grown legs that ran in my direction for once. The HOA issued a dry statement about the unfortunate vehicular incident and placed Royce on administrative leave, which is what you call a timeout when you're afraid to say the thing you mean. They offered to partner with me on a compliant mailbox solution. I thanked them and pointed gently at the very compliant mailbox already planted in the earth. In the days that followed, I learned something I'd suspected for a long time. Intimidation hates daylight. Patrol cars stopped lingering at the fence line. The anonymous notes dried up like puddles after a hot wind. The couple who used to speed walk past my drive without looking returned Miss Pauline's wave. I fixed my fence gate, which had sagged under neglect, brewed coffee on the porch without scanning the road, and waited for the mail like it was a ceremony. Again, envelopes, catalogs, a postcard from my sister with a joke about buying stock in cement. The sheriff's report landed a week later, official and quiet. Excessive speed, it said, and property within compliance. There was no victory march and no apology, just a record that placed cause where cause belonged. I put the paper in the folder and slid it into the drawer with the rubber bands and tape. Ordinary things living together. And yet, not everything settled as neatly as a drawer. A man from the HOA, a different face, same tie, showed up at my gate with a smile that had been ironed flat. "Mr. Hale," he said, "we're committed to harmony. Perhaps you'd consider relocating your mailbox a few feet to ease tensions." He gestured at the air like tensions were fog, and I could part them with a broom. I looked down the road, at the post standing straight and plain, and I looked back at him. "Here's the thing," I said. "Harmony isn't the absence of boundaries. Sometimes it's the presence of one that's kept." He fussed with his clipboard. "Some of our residents feel unsafe." I felt unsafe, I said, not angry, just done. "For months." I nodded toward the SUV-sized gouge in the story he was trying to tell. He left with a card and the soft threat of another meeting, another committee, another polite tug on the rope. I kept the card for the file. I watered the mesquite. I moved on with my day. People think the satisfying part was the crash, like that moment solved anything. It didn't. The satisfying part was realizing I didn't have to become the thing I despised to stop it. No booby traps. No secret spikes. I didn't hide behind ugliness. I stood behind something honest and strong, and in the end, the ugliness revealed itself, loudly, in a way the whole street could see. That's the difference between revenge and a boundary. The first tries to hurt. The second refuses to be hurt. Some nights I catch myself replaying of lights, the hiss, the dumb courage of a man who thought the world would keep bending for him, and I wonder about all the places where small wars like this are being fought. A garden fence moved an inch at a time. A letter from a board that mistakes power for purpose. A neighbor who doesn't wave back, who collects little offenses like trophies. Maybe your version isn't a mailbox. Maybe it's a noise complaint or a parking space or the way someone looks at your kid, like you don't belong on the street you pay for. Maybe you've swallowed your bitterness so long you've forgotten what it feels like to stand up and stay soft at the same time. The morning after everything, I watched the mail truck ease up to the box. The carrier woman with a braid and eyes that missed nothing flipped the flag down, slid a bundle inside, and gave the post a little pat like we'd both come through a storm. The light was the color of wheat. The cicadas had given way to sparrows. Across the road, a curtain moved and then stilled. I raised my coffee in that direction, not a taunt, not a victory lap, just a nod to the truth that we all live next to someone's line. I don't know how this ends in the long run. Maybe the HOA finds a new way to tug. Maybe they don't. Maybe Royce apologizes one day in the produce aisle when we both reach for tomatoes. Maybe he tells me I humiliated him, and maybe he's right, though that wasn't the point. Maybe this becomes one of those stories you tell over brisket on a Sunday, remember the time, and we all laugh because it's safe to laugh at distance. Or maybe it sticks like a burr on the county's sleeve, a lesson about what happens when rules are used like a hammer until someone builds something that can't be knocked down with a swing. If you were here on the porch, I'd ask you this. Where do you draw your line, and what do you build to hold it that doesn't turn you mean? Have you ever stood in the dark and felt someone aim their smallness at your life, then decided to answer with something steady and legal and plain, something that doesn't apologize for existing? Do you think what I did makes me the problem? Should I have swallowed it, moved the post, called another meeting, and watched it die in polite talk? Or do you believe a town gets better when bullies learn there are places that don't give? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what your version of this mailbox is. If you've been through a fight like this HOA or neighbor, or just the invisible committee that thinks it owns your piece, drop your story below. Who was right? Who was wrong? And where would you have drawn the line? Share it. Argue it. Send this to the one friend who keeps rebuilding their life no matter who tries to knock it down.